Rolling.
Happy Indigenous Peoples Day. Happy Discovery of America Day. This day is about celebrating the discovery of the New World by Europeans 531 years ago. Specifically, Christopher Columbus, whose name wasn't Christopher Columbus, but actually he called himself Cristobal Colon. But why do we memorialize him specifically? He didn't actually discover the United States mainland. Columbus landed on San Salvador, Trinidad, and other islands south of Florida. The explorer to reach the United States mainland was a Spaniard named Juan Ponce de Leon in 1513, 21 years later. But Ponce de Leon did travel with Columbus to America on his second voyage. Did you know that this holiday wasn't celebrated as an officially recognized holiday until 1971, after President Lyndon Johnson signed it into law? Why wasn't it recognized as a holiday until the 36th president? Why was this day signed into law as a federal day off and not Halloween or Election Day or Super Bowl Monday? Short answer is it's because of lobbying, which means scheduling a meeting with elected officials by calling their legislative office. But back to Columbus. To start with, what most people believe about Columbus is because of a writer named Washington Irving. He's famous for writing Sleepy Hollow, which became a movie starring Johnny Depp. But he also wrote a biography of Christopher Columbus in 1828 called A History of the Life and Voyages of Christopher Columbus. But he took liberty in his writing, and today it's recognized as one of the first examples of American romantic historical fiction. The book became very popular and had 175 editions published by the year 1900. The first celebration of Columbus Day was in 1792 in New York by a group called the Tammany Hall, also known as the Columbian Order, an influential political group of American men who dressed up as Native Americans, and initiation into the group included torches, mystical symbols, Native American incantations, and they would greet each other with secret handshakes and obscure code words. They elevated Columbus to the status of saint. Jumping to the late 1800s, there was a growing number of Italian immigrants. Growing number of Italians immigrating, who had been brought in by the business community to replace black labor. Sugar planters, in particular, sought workers who were more efficient than former slaves. They hired immigrant recruiters to bring Italians to southern Louisiana. In the 1890s, thousands of Italians were arriving in New Orleans each year. Many settled in the French Quarter, which by the early 1900s had a section known as Little Sicily. Furthermore, during the whole of the 1800s and well into the 1900s, Italian immigrants to the United States were often referred to as white niggers. The mayor of New Orleans had this to say. The mayor of New Orleans at the time, named Joseph Shakespeare, had this to say about Italians, complaining that the city had become attractive to, quote, the worst classes of Europe, Southern Italians and Sicilians, the most idle, vicious, worthless people among us. He claimed they were filthy in their persons and homes, and blamed them for the spread of disease, concluding that they were without courage, honor, truth, pride, religion, or any quality that goes to make a good citizen. These were common anti-Italian sentiments. So much so that in March of 1891 in New Orleans, a lynch mob of over 1,000 people had murdered 11 Italian immigrants, hanging and shooting. Many news media and Theodore Roosevelt were sympathetic toward the mob because anti-Italian sentiments were common, especially towards Southern Italians, also known as Sicilians. The incident strained relations between the United States and Italy. The Italian consul Pascal Corte left New Orleans in late May 1891, and the New York Times published his statement accusing the city politicians of responsibility for the lynchings. The Italian government demanded that the lynch mob be brought to justice, and that reparations be paid to the dead men's families. When the U.S. declined to prosecute the mob leaders, Italy recalled its ambassador from Washington in protest. The United States followed suit, recalling its legation, which is like an embassy, from Rome. Diplomatic relations remained at an impasse for over a year, and there were rumors of a declaration of war on America as a result of the murders. A year later, in 1892, President Benjamin Harrison declared Columbus Day a one-time national celebration. The proclamation was part of a wider effort after the lynching incident to placate Italian Americans and ease diplomatic tensions with Italy. On Columbus Day in 1892, teachers, preachers, poets, and politicians used rituals to teach ideals of patriotism. These rituals took themes such as citizenship boundaries, the importance of loyalty to the nation, and the celebration of social progress. Included among them the Pledge of Allegiance by Francis Bellamy. In 1934, 42 years later, as a result of lobbying by a Catholic society called the Knights of Columbus. At the time, Catholic immigrants were also being marginalized, so the Knights of Columbus chose Columbus as their patron saint to express their belief that not only could Catholics be full members of American society, but they were also instrumental in its foundation. So, the Knights of Columbus and New York City Italian leader Generoso Pope lobbied to the government, and Congress passed a statute stating, the President is requested to issue each year a proclamation, 1. Designating October 12th as Columbus Day, 2. Calling on United States government officials to display the flag of the United States on all government buildings on Columbus Day, and 3. Inviting the people of the United States to observe Columbus Day in schools and churches and other suitable places with appropriate ceremonies that express the public sentiment befitting the anniversary of the discovery of America. President Franklin D. Roosevelt responded by making such a proclamation. This was just a proclamation and did not lead to the modern federal holiday. In 1941, 7 years later, during World War II, when the Italian government declared war on the U.S., Italians and Italian Americans were put into internment camps and lost rights as enemy aliens due to a belief they would be loyal to Italy and not America in World War II. They were forced to surrender any hand cameras, shortwave radios, and guns, and were subject to curfew and movement restrictions, and later were forced to move out of certain areas. In 1942, Franklin Roosevelt had the removal of the designation of Italian Americans as enemy aliens announced on Columbus Day, along with a plan to offer citizenship to 200,000 elderly Italians living in the United States who had been unable to acquire citizenship due to a literacy requirement. But the implementation of the announcement was not completed until those interned in camps were released after Italy's surrender to the Allies on September 8, 1943. In 1966, 25 years later, a man named Mariano A. Luca from Buffalo, New York, founded the National Columbus Day Committee, which lobbied to make Columbus Day a federal holiday. These efforts were successful, and legation to create Columbus Day as a federal holiday were signed by President Lyndon Johnson on June 28, 1968, to be effective beginning in 1971. So, it's been a federal holiday for 52 years. Even though it's called Columbus Day, the Italian American community would like you to understand it as a celebration of Italian heritage, and indigenous people would like you to sympathize and empathize with the true suffering inflicted on Native Americans with the westward expansion of Europeans. More brutality than you probably imagine. So, happy Indigenous Peoples Day, happy Discovery of America Day. This day is about celebrating the discovery of the New World by Europeans 531 years ago.